Thank you so much. Let me turn on my camera as well. Thanks for hosting this.
Oh, our pleasure. Our pleasure. Okay, can you guys see on your end if you're recording?
It alerted us that you were.
Yeah. Good. Okay. All right. Well, I'm just going to change, move that and get started. Got a few people coming in. That's wonderful. Anne's here. All right. Well, welcome everybody to our Semiotics of Peace, Compassion, Empathy regular webinar series. It's good to see so many faces. Lovely. So what we're going to do today is take us through a couple of different ways to do systemic analysis using these tools on texts which relate to peace, compassion, and empathy. And the way we're doing it, if you read the abstract, is by two of us taking a turn each. So Aoni Atewi will be kicking off, and he's going to do some analysis using appraisal analysis, and I'm going to then follow up demonstrating how I do theme analysis and thematic progression analysis for everybody. And then we'll have some questions after that, and I would like us to finish within 90 minutes. So Aoni and I are going to be about 30 minutes each. At least I think mine's going to be a bit shorter than yours, Aoni. But so please don't feel like I'm limiting you to 30 minutes. But yeah, just to give everybody a sense of how this is going to unfold. So if you haven't met Aoni before, Aoni is a lecturer in linguistics and forensic linguistics from Charles Darwin University. And I'm just going to read you a little opening in his research profile page. He focuses on terrorism, cybercrime, and digital deviance. He's also deeply interested in exploring the semiotics of compassion in digital activism, particularly as strategic communication employed by resistance movements. Atewi, that is Aoni, is committed to United Nations Sustainable Development Goal number 16, which aims to promote peace, just, peaceful, and inclusive societies. So let's kick off with Aoni. Over to you.
Thanks, Elizabeth. All right. Okay, hi everyone. It's my pleasure to be with you this morning, afternoon, night, wherever you are. And I guess my presentation will take up to 40 minutes. Thanks to the generous Elizabeth for giving me the extra 10 minutes from her time. So today I'll try to be direct in terms of how we can use the appraisal framework and a kind of affiliation analysis to understand how compassion is developed in social movement discourse, particularly BDS, the BDS movement. And what is BDS? I'll come to that in a minute. So towards that end, I'll give a little bit of introduction to compassion development, appraisal, and affiliation. And after that, I'll showcase how affiliation, or what I term moral affiliation in activism, is approached through a model to linguistically describe compassion development as a social discursive process that involves three processes: identity alignment, positioning others, and exhorting them towards some purposeful action. And I'll try to conclude with some research suggested for future focus. First of all, I'd like to contextualize my presentation within the most recent work of Van Dijk's focus on social movement discourse. And according to Theo and Van Dijk, social movement, there are many social movement activities that include discursive activities. And these include meetings, assemblies, interviews, press conferences, manifestos, pamphlets, banners, graffiti, websites, blogs, social media posts, and everyday talk. And my examples today are coming from websites and social media posts, particularly Facebook posts and the landing pages and websites related to the BDS movement. So the focus will be on social media posts and the landing websites in particular. And I'll be using SFL tools, particularly the appraisal and affiliation framework, to understand how BDS Australia's texts are designed to bring people together and exhort them to perform coordinated acts of compassionate help that are aligned with the BDS strategic aim. But what is the aim of BDS? The aim is to end international support for Israeli violations of international law by forcing companies, institutions, and governments to change their policies. And they argue that, the BDS, argue that as Israeli companies and institutions become isolated or pressured, Israel will find it more difficult to oppress Palestinians. And we can notice here some values being emphasized in this strategic aim. That is violations of international law, or otherwise compliance by international law, and oppression. Okay. In order to coordinate some work in compassion or to alleviate the suffering of the Palestinian according to the BDS, that requires one or institutions to have the desire and to put some effort to alleviate the perceived suffering of others. And this is the right definition of compassion according to Albert Bandura. And the capacity of compassion and the moral agency of individuals and institutions remain dormant until activated. And that activation happens either by witnessing the plight of others or by being positioned through discourse to take action, or some awareness being raised around the plight of others. So the capacity for vicarious arousal to the plight of others plays a vital role in the development of compassion. But how does this happen through language? In the most recent work on peace, compassion, and empathy by the Committee of the SIG, we see that Thompson, Ingrid, and other colleagues argue that language and communication play a major role in raising awareness about the pain of others and the arousal of compassion. And they play a major role in helping people know or learn or experience what's going on. So if they cannot make it to the occupied Palestinian territories, for example, then they can know about what's going on and about the pain or suffering of others. So knowing, feeling for others, and acting are the three main processes involved in any act of compassion. And language plays a major role in that. And here I'm coming from Gordon and Tannen's argument for knowledge schemas and what is considered accepted or morally accepted around the world. And they call this knowledge schema. So knowledge schema's framing of people's experiences is a form of framing that accounts for shared social assumptions and moral expectations about the world, people, event, humanity, how people should interact with each other, what is accepted and what is unaccepted. And these social forms are taken as a context for identity construction work, as well as bringing people together towards shared work to alleviate the suffering of people in distress. Key to these frames and their persuasive power is the evaluative language used in discourse. According to Dubois, an evaluative act simultaneously includes positioning self and others and alignment or disalignment with certain values. So whenever we talk about the evaluative language, we simultaneously talk about positioning and alignment or disalignment according to Dubois. And this makes work on appraisal very relevant to any analysis related to alignment, positioning, and affiliation. But what is appraisal? The appraisal framework offers a discourse semantic approach to evaluative language. And this framework consists of three main systems: the attitude system, graduation system, and engagement. And today we are going to focus on attitude, and that is values used for construing positive or negative stances. Let's take a look at this slide, which summarizes the attitude system. Every time an author, speaker, or writer wants to evaluate something or take a stance towards an issue, they simultaneously choose one option from the three subsystems here: the attitude type system, explicitness subsystem, and attitude polarity subsystem. From the attitude type, the choice can be affect, judgment, or appreciation. So affect is concerned with emotion and reaction, such as how you feel, feeling cowardice, fear of something, and so on. Judgment, that is the evaluation of people and people's actions. And appreciation is the evaluation of entities, processes, and so on. So here we have right path. Path is evaluated as being right, and that is an example of appreciation. And these examples are coming from different kind of discourse just to demonstrate the appraisal or the attitude analysis. Regarding the explicitness subsystem, a writer, author, or speaker need to choose inscribed or invoked kind of evaluation. And when it comes to the polarity, that is positive or negative. So you cannot choose positive and negative at the same time. So that's why we call these systems. So one choice from each subsystem at a time. What is distinct and different from this kind of discourse, and that is violent extremist discourse, for example, where I'm bringing some examples here. What distinguishes this extremist discourse from digital activist discourse is that digital activists use evaluative language to frame and activate shared moral orders, shared with the audience. And people who are the Australian audience in today's examples and scenario are encouraged to challenge Australians as well for violating certain moral orders, such as institutions not complying to the expectations around ethical research when collaborating with the ILBIT system that is used by Israel to develop drones used in Gaza, for example, and so on. So the appraisal resources are very important for enacting affiliation and bringing people together to operate within shared moral orders. And that is what is referenced in Albert Bandura's work as re-affiliation or realignment or rehumanization. So it's about rehumanizing the kind of relationship between conflicting parties, as well as people who are standing aside, bystanders, I mean, who are not aware of what's going on. So raising awareness about the plight of others is the first step towards exhorting people towards certain actions. And I have to mention here that compassion as a process involves different processes or sub-processes. And this is clear in contexts such as mental health, a practice where compassion is considered as a combination of professionals' virtue, the establishment of a relational space, and the patient's response. So it's not enough for a nurse and doctor to be compassionate, but they have to create that third or relational space with the patient, and the patient should acknowledge the effectiveness of the measures taken by the doctor or the nurses to help them recover. So having these three components in the mental health practice can foster hope and recovery. And a similar process is found in brand communications, where brands such as Aldi, for example, during the COVID-19 lockdowns, presented themselves as caring brands and compassionate brands. And here they presented themselves as able to notice what people need, feel for them, particularly the vulnerable shoppers, the elderly, women, etc., and respond to these needs by allocating 2 shopping slots for them on Tuesday and Thursday. Okay. So compassion is considered in different contexts as an enabler of people, regardless of the context and the field that they are operating within. But when it comes to human rights and activism, compassion is considered as an enabler for achieving well-being, peace, inclusiveness, and social justice. And it builds on a reality of interdependent ethos. So people need to do something in order to help alleviate the suffering of others. People need to pressure, to BDS. So that is to boycott, divest, and impose sanctions, especially in the situation of the Palestinian occupied territories. So, and that is where we find in the literature on peace and conflict resolutions, the term systemic compassion that builds on acknowledging the shared humanity and taking shared humanity and human rights, especially human dignity, as the cornerstone for socially sanctioned patterns of practices in a field that privileges the norm of compassion. And this is the kind of compassion, systemic compassion, that is considered and prioritized by the United Nations agencies, the ICC and the ICJ, especially when it comes to their rulings and decisions and orders related to the ongoing plausible case of genocide in Gaza. So according to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, all members of the human family are born with dignity, equality, and inalienable rights. And these prepare the foundation for any act of systemic compassion. Okay. So going now into compassion development, drawing on the affiliation framework or the affiliation theory as grounded in SFL. Okay. Before that, I need to mention that why I call it moral affiliation in activism. So the term in activism is coming from the from cultural psychology, the cultural psychology field, where in activism is a perspective that emphasizes the expressive and dynamically enacted nature of cultural meaning and the consensual nature of meaningful conduct. So digital activists encourage people to take action consensually, and that action is consensually coordinated. So they need to follow whatever actions advised by, for example, the BDS movement in order to have the effect required. Okay. All right. Regarding our case study to look at the affiliation analysis today, as I said, we are focusing on some posts by BDS Australia in particular, which is part of the global nonviolent anti-colonial BDS movement. And it is inspired by South Africa anti-apartheid and US civil rights movements. And the backdrop against which BDS operates is the reality that the Palestinian territories were in 1946, as shown in green, and in 2012, only that part was remaining from the Palestinian territories. And today, you can see the spaces probably here between the green entities, and these spaces refer to the illegal settlements and military blocks between the Palestinian towns, villages, etc. And according to the Israeli Information Center for Human Rights, that is B'Tselem, the construction of these barriers, and through the construction of these barriers, including the separation wall, as you can see in the photo here, Israel broke up contiguous Palestinian urban and rural blocks and severed inter-community ties that had been forged and cemented over the course of many generations. It imposed an arbitrary reconfiguration of space based on settlement boundaries. And that's why the word settlement and illegal settlements emerges repeatedly in the BDS discourse, as you can notice in a minute. Okay, now we move into the affiliation analysis. But what is affiliation? We learned a bit about the appraisal. Now let's learn a bit about the affiliation before we undertake the analysis. The affiliation framework was developed within SFL, and it focuses on how social bonds are negotiated in discourse. And it's the work on affiliation started with the work by Knight, working on conversational interactions, and then a spread focusing on covering a wide range of discourses, including social media discourse. The main analytical unit in the affiliation analysis is the coupling of ideational and interpersonal meaning. Okay. So the main assumption here is that social values or bonds are realized in discourse as couplings of ideational and attitudinal meanings, through which participants discursively co-identify. And this is based on Martin's insight that we do not simply affiliate with feelings, but with feelings about phenomena. That's why we have coupling of ideational meaning and interpersonal meaning. That is the evaluative meaning. So we affiliate with feelings about phenomena and the activities people participate in, however abstract or concrete. Therefore, the key unit of analysis in discursive affiliation or disaffiliation is co-identification, is the ideation attitude coupling. For example, in one of the campaigns, BDS says, Puma is complicit in Israel's apartheid regime. Here we have Puma as an ideation coupled with a negative judgment that is complicit. That's why we bring appraisal analysis with affiliation analysis, because it is the way to ensure systematic kind of analysis here of the evaluative language. So this coupling instantiates a bond, and that is supporting apartheid is bad. And this becomes the focus of negotiation and co-identification in discourse, whether you support apartheid or you're against apartheid, and so on. So looking at Facebook posts and the linked landing pages related to three campaigns, mainly boycott Puma, don't buy HP, and stop Elbit. This will give us a kind of a representation of the most recent texts that the BDS got engaged with just before the October the 7th and its repercussions. So the focus today is on language and only on language. Just a quick reminder, here the affiliation analysis focuses on compassion, developing through a process of identity alignment, positioning others within shared moral fields, and exhorting them towards purposeful social actions as commodities. the first step of the analysis and its findings. The first step in this analysis was to identify all evaluative couplings and the instantiated bonds, as in the example I shared earlier, which can be visually represented as follows. So negative judgment is coupled with Puma, and this negative attitude is directed at Puma, expressing condemnation and disalignment with its support of appetite. Okay. By tracking these bonds, we can conceive of persona, textual personae, aligning themselves into subcultures, configuring master identities, and constituting a culture. So not only, so the focus is not only on evaluative couplings, but also attitudinally fused terms such as freedom, appetite, because themselves have that evaluative charge, and they can provoke, they can afford evaluation. So by identifying all bonds, we come with a list of bonds that operate to align with positively charged ideational meanings, mainly the BDS, the urge activist, etc. And we come across negative bonds that can be glossed as acts of condemnation. And by looking at any mention or reference to moral order, we can argue for the activated moral orders in discourse. Going back to the same example, Puma is complicit in Israel's apartheid regime. We have the word apartheid, which activates the legal moral order pertinent to the 1973 International Apartheid Convention. By doing this kind of analysis, I can summarize the bonds and couplings used repeatedly in the boycott Puma as follows. So in the first example here, we have the Israel Football Association operates in illegal Israeli settlements on land stolen from Palestinians. And Puma supports this association. According to this example, Puma is coupled with negative judgment, and the function of that coupling is to disalign the audience with the negatively charged Puma. In the second example, Palestinians and people of conscience around the world are calling on Puma to end its complicity. So people of conscience here, and what they are urged to do, that is a positive judgment coupled with the urged audience, people around the world. And the function is to align with those positively charged activists. And the moral field activated here is the international law, because we talk about stolen lands, illegal settlements. So we talk about the international law. And we see the same kind of activation and the same kind of language in all posts. This is an example of the posts. By looking at the Stop Elbit campaign, we found the same kind of couplings and the same functions emerging again and again. In example 3, we have collaborating with weapons manufacturers like Elbit, Israel's huge arms manufacturer, is a disgrace to RMIT Melbourne City, Australia. And here, the BDS is campaigning or pressuring the RMIT University to divest from the and to stop collaboration with the Elbit weapon system. So RMIT is coupled with negative judgment, and the function is to disalign with RMIT. In the second example, the activists are coupled, and what they are urged to do are coupled with positive judgment to align with them. Okay, we see the same kind of coupling appearing in all posts. In the third campaign, that is Do Not Buy HP, we also see the same kind of couplings and the same functions playing role there. Let's consider example 5. International companies involved with Israel's illegal settlements are complicit in the crime of apartheid. And then the BDS are saying that you, HP, are also involved. So HP, this means you are also involved and complicit in the crime of apartheid. So the HP is coupled with negative judgment, and the function is to disalign with HP, with the negatively charged HP. And in exercise 4, we reiterate our call for mass boycotts of HP until they end the complicity in Israeli apartheid and war crimes. Again, we, by taking this action, are coupled with positive judgment, aligning we, the BDS, and urged activists with positively charged meanings. Okay. By visually representing the repeated bonds, negotiated bonds, we come across 7 main bonds being negotiated again and again and again in the boycott Puma, such as Puma is complicit with Israel's apartheid, Puma support teams on illegal land grabs, and so on. And the same appears in the Stop Elbit campaign, where we find 7 bonds being negotiated all the time, repeatedly. For example, RMIT is killer. RMIT's collaboration is a disgrace. The Victorian Andrews government is contemptuous of international law, and so on. So these are the negotiated bonds. And the same appears in the Don't Buy HP campaign. We also find 7 bonds being negotiated repeatedly. But what is the point of repeating the same bonds throughout a campaign? This gives rise to what Binford and Snow term frame amplification process. So the repetition serves that strategic frame amplification process and makes certain experiences and ideas salient within this context, within the occupied territories. Okay. For more, for deeper understanding of what's going on, I would encourage you to read the full paper, which is coming out soon on compassion development in the special issue. And I'll make sure that I share a copy with anyone who's interested in that paper from the crowd today. So I'm not going to cover all these details because these details are covered there, which cover a lot of details and a lot of nitty-gritty, very important issues related to complementary analysis of communion affiliation related to identity alignment. But now I'd love to move to the second phase of analysis, and that is how the BDS manages to position others and exhort them to take action that serves to alleviate the suffering of the Palestinians. And here we look at the most recent theorization of TINA by Yegin Duran, Martin Zapavinia, and other colleagues, who argue that we tender meanings and the audience render either support or rejection to that tendered meaning. So what is being tendered here is either a proposal or a proposition, something to be done, or meanings and information about what's going on. And the second, that is tendering propositions, help the BDS movement to continue to raise awareness about what's going on and to raise credibility about the urged proposals. So basically, when we talk about tendering, we talk about tendering proposition or proposal. Okay, and this is an example of tendered proposal. Send a message to Puma before the AGM. Send a message to the CEO. Tell Puma and shareholders and support for Israel appetite. And usually the BDS shares a draft letter that the audience can use. They can simply just sign and send to the CEO before the AGM and so on to ensure a coordinated effort. So here we have tendering of proposal, followed by proposal, followed by proposal. This is the pattern here. Okay. We see the same in this example. Send a message to Puma before the AGM and then a link that takes the audience to more information and propositions to enhance the credibility of urged action here. We have a similar pattern here. Stop Elbit, and then that is followed by proposition. Okay, so the first pattern is to start with a proposal and follow that by proposal or by proposition to enhance its credibility. Okay. Again, we have tendered proposal, boycott Puma, and then more information about why to boycott Puma, and that is tendered proposition. And the end here is with tendered proposal again. So we have proposal, proposition, proposal. The second pattern is to start by proposition, to lay the foundation and tell the story and then urge people to do something. So here we have a story about Puma. Global sportswear manufacturer Puma is involved in violations of international law and human rights, blah, 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 blah. After telling what's going on, the proposal comes. Take action, and that action is sign the petition. So I've got tender proposition, tender proposal, tender proposal. Okay, the same appears here. Tender proposition and proposal. Proposition, proposition, then proposal. Stop Elbit. End Australian government deals with Elbit. Join the campaign. All proposals concluding the message of positioning here. The same appears in all campaigns. Okay, this is an example of a message or letter being drafted by BDS for the audience to use when addressing the government. Okay, as you can see, we see the same patterns appearing again and again and again. Proposal, 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 kind of proposal, speak out on campus, sign petition, join RMIT students for Palestine, speak out, sign this petition, why this petition matters, okay, and so on. One thing before I conclude is that after raising awareness about what's going on, attempting to forge identity alignments with the audience, and positioning the audience and urging them to take action, the BDS tends to share some stories of success with the audience to tell them that regardless of the size of your effort, even by signing a petition, that will have an impact. And they tell the audience that, for example, by signing petitions and doing what is urged now, Auckland Roots decided to drop Puma. Qatar Sports Club decided to do that. Luton Town drops Puma again. Malaysia's UITM Lions does the same, and so on. So they tell people about the impact of their action in relation to HP, Puma, and Elbit. To conclude, I know this is a quick exercise of how we can make use of the appraisal and affiliation analysis to understand digital activist discourse and the development of compassion. But I'd love to encourage everyone to give that paper a read for more details. In this presentation, I hope that I highlighted the significance of the appraisal and affiliation analysis in light of the increasing prevalence of digital calls for action in public discourse, and in light of the specific context of the Israeli occupation of the Palestinian territories, and in light of the Australian grassroots reactions to these events, which makes this kind of analysis timely and relevant. And this presentation hopefully emphasized the role of language in raising awareness about the suffering of others and fostering a sense of shared humanized feeling and pro-shared moral order affiliation. This confirms Firth's argument about language as being a network of bonds and obligations. And I'd like to finish with emphasizing Firth's words about the role of language and language users. And here I use the same words to talk about social activists in general, whom we can view as being active participators in creating and maintaining cultural values, shared cultural, legal, and institutional moral orders. And as linguists, we have the tools to forge a more harmonious and interconnected future and to understand how language and other semiotic resources function in discourse for good or evil. We can play the role of researcher activists and activist linguists, and we can inform the design of social movement campaigns. And I'd like to encourage my colleagues to focus more on social movement discourses of solidarity, as well as the discourses of peace, compassion, empathy, drawing and using the tools of SFL. With this, I come to the end of my presentation and I hand over to Elizabeth. And after Elizabeth, we'll be ready to receive your questions. Elizabeth, floor is yours. You are mute.
Unmute.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for that, Arnie. That was extraordinary. Huge depth and breadth all in one breath in 40 minutes. Well done. Just before we move to me, two things I'd just like to put to you right now is there's been a request on chat for you to share slides. So that's for you to make a decision on. And also, while I'm talking, if you've got an opportunity to put in chats the publication details of the papers you've referred to. But for everybody's information, I think there are two papers in particular Arnie referred to, which are about to come out in the journal Language, Context and Text, issue 6.1. So that's the best way to get the most recent ones. But I'll leave it to you, Arnie, if that's okay. Now I'll just share my screen and hopefully it will go without a glitch, which is never necessarily. There it is. Bring it up here. Bigger. Okay, I'm assuming everybody can see that. Okay, so welcome to part two. My interest has been around various modalities of the languages of peace, and at the moment I'm very interested in a modality called nonviolent communication, which is has been developed as a designed discourse by a clinical psychologist called Marshall Rosenberg, who sadly has passed away, but has left a wonderful legacy of an international organization called the Center for Nonviolent Communication. So it's cnvc.org. there are people all over the world that engage in this discourse. I won't be spending much time talking about it specifically. I just want to show you the tools I used to get a handle on what was happening in one of the, they call it modes of the NVC framework. And this is the mode known as empathic listening or receiving empathy, or just called empathy. So I'll be using a text, an example of an empathic listening text, which includes language, but also has moments of silence. I'll be using a couple of samples, so I'll be playing some of them. So I want to take you from audio to transcript, and then what I do with the transcript, which is parsing into clauses. And then once I'm into clauses, once I've got the clauses down, I can then start to engage in the two kinds of analysis that were intriguing me as I listened to these dialogues unfolding. My linguistic brain was thinking, and so I was very keen to look at how theme and rhyme worked and how thematic progression, whether or not any patterns of thematic progression can be identified. So I'll just talk about those in a moment, but I'll just do the oopsie, hang on, I haven't put it on display. There we go. So I'm just going to play this. This is, you can find it on YouTube. Just Google Marshall Rosenberg and empathic listening. I'm only going to play a little portion. So this is a role play in a learning context where Marshall Rosenberg has asked if somebody would like to receive some empathy, and if so, could that person please tell Marshall what or who he is going to role play in this interaction. So in this case, the woman has said, I want to talk about my father. So not knowing anything about what she wanted to say about her father, he took on the role of father, but father giving empathy, even though father has caused the pain in this person. So I'll just play a short excerpt.
So let's start with that. Donna, I'm confident that I can empathically connect with whatever you want to say. So please tell me what's still alive in you as a result of our prior relationship that you'd like me to hear.
I feel worthless, and I feel totally rejected by all the men that I touch. I want to be in a relationship. I've been through 2 divorces, and I do not know how to even connect with any man because of you. When I would come to you for any kind of a need that I really wanted you to listen to, you immediately would either interrupt, and the first word that would come out of your mouth was that I deserved it, and I was totally a no good, stupid idiot, and I was a worthless female, girl. All those names are still haunting me. Every time any man that I have a relationship with tries to get close to me, I don't trust them because of you. It's all because of you, and I'm just beyond. That's what's alive right now, is that I don't know where to go. I'm 30 years old. I've been through 2 divorces, and I'm miserable and alone.
Well, I want to be sure that I'm taking all of that in, Donna. That's very precious, and I'm grateful to you for willing to open up. But I want to be sure I'm hearing you, so what I'm hearing is that there's still a great deal of pain in you, hurt, that your need for respect wasn't met by the way I would respond to you at times. And as a result of that, you're feeling rather desperate about how it's affecting your present relationships with other men and how it's keeping you from getting your needs for closeness met. Am I hearing you correctly?
Okay, so that's just the opening of, I think it's about an 11-minute interaction. But you can see it's dialogue, it's spoken text, and it's complicated. So I was interested nonetheless in, because the nonviolent communication community have a particular view on how to support somebody in pain with empathy and what kind of steps you go through. So Marshall is modeling the steps, and I was very keen to see how these steps were realized lexicogrammatically, and how these lexicogrammatical realizations make meaning in relation to that. So the first thing I had to do is transcribe it. I had 10 different dialogues, but I'm just using this one as the example for what I did. So I'm not sure whether you know about rev.com, but it's pretty handy. Rev.com has recently also not just transcribed things for a fee, but now they're transcribing things in two ways. You can do it directly with AI, or you can do it with a real person. So with AI, obviously you get things instantly. You can get them in seconds. So a big long text, say 1,000 clauses, 20 minutes later you get it instead of waiting days. So you can just see this is what the interface looks like. And then when you get the dialogue, so I transcribed my talk at the international conference last week, just so I can remember what I said, and I can use it to later on to write the paper up, just to remember exactly what I said. So it's very handy like that. And so you can edit it and just make better sense. But you can, if you just look at that quickly, you can see that AI rendered version looks pretty good. So once you've got it transcribed, and here it is, me now starting to put it into something I can work with. I'll just leave that there. I needed to get a handle on it for theme. I needed to know what its clauses were, and because it's spoken, it's in clauses as opposed to sentences. So I required a parsing process. So I'll then begin here. The first thing I wanted to do was put it into individual clauses. So down the far left, I number each clause. But because each clause in English starts with a theme, unless it's a fragment, and I manage fragments as well, and just, with whether there were just nominal groups or just expanded nominal, that was all dealt with in this framework. But I could do the theme analysis as I did the clause analysis. And so just to bring people that might not be familiar with theme ream analysis, the theme in Halliday's terms is the point of departure of the message. So I want to talk about something. So the thing I want to talk about is the theme, and what I want to say about it is the ream. And when you start to pull the themes apart, they fall into the bit of the theme that links what they want to say now with what they said before. So that's textual. The bit of the theme that connects with the other person, either through some kind of grammar of making questions and answers, or perhaps through some kind of comment adjunct or something like that. But mostly the themes are looking at an ideational content, that is, who's the person talking, or what's the topic that's being talked about. So basically I take one transcript, I put it into its clauses, and at the same time start to deconstruct it into themes and the reams. So you can just see here at the first instance, the father starts off, so please tell me what's alive in you as a result of our prior relationship that you'd like me to hear. And she starts off, I feel worthless and I feel totally rejected. I've been through 2 divorces, and so on. So you can start to see here just at the beginning that when the father's talking, the father's addressing her, and when she's talking. So when the father's talking and he's talking to her, so you comes up as an ideational theme, and when she's talking about her experience, so she's coming up, I is coming up. So this was important. And notice that there's a lot more information over there on the ream side. and you can start to see the things that are alive for her, things like her view of herself in a negative affect of worthless, her experience of rejection, the fact of 2 divorces. So all of this is sitting there in the ream, because the ream typically is where the new information, the newsworthy part of the message, can be found. Now, that's not necessarily always, but we call that the unmarked. So in an unmarked clause with theme, it would be one of these ideational themes. And this we'd know about, so we'd call it a given theme, because if you can see here, I, we know we're dealing with the same person, so it's given. And over here, we've got information that's new each time. So we've got this nice pattern of a given theme and a new ream. But the theme and the ream don't always fall into given and new information status patterns. That can change. So that's what I was quite interested in when I was doing this work. So I would do this for all of the texts or the dialogues that I was working with. And so you can see it's painstaking, it's slow. I use Excel, and as I make decisions based on what's possibly happening in the clause that I want to capture, as I move right in the spreadsheet, I keep adding new categories as I go. So for example, when I did the appraisal analysis on this, I would add the appraisal categories for each clause. So my experience with parsing into clauses is that it's a very valuable exercise to do anyway, if you're interested in looking at other analyses. Get something into the clauses and you can start to apply different systemic tools to those clauses. So once I had my themes and reams, I was then keen to look at patterns. So I've already mentioned the pattern here of the daughter is talking about herself, and what she brings to our ears is lots of information in the reams about how she's feeling and what her experiences have been. Okay, so Danish in his work in the 70s, and followed on a lot by Peter Fries in the 80s and 90s, did a whole lot of work on how do different themes pattern, and so how do these patterns progress through texts, and are these patterns indicative of particular text types or genres? And so that was important for me, because I'm interested in can we argue that empathy is in fact a particular genre with particular thematic patterns and particular lexicogrammatical choices that point to the meanings that are being made? And from my study, I would argue yes. Interestingly, I would also say that it's a genre of interpersonal connection that ideationally, when we think about an exposition, or the genre of exposition or of recount, we're actually recounting ideational, or we're sharing ideational information, where when we're giving empathy, we're sharing interpersonal information, or the attitudes, judgments, and appreciation. So we're in the interpersonal space. So I see it very much as an interpersonal genre, or an interpersonal, yeah, that'll do. But to kind of look for patterns was my next step. And Danish's work, he has 3 patterns that you find across different text types. So the first one I just want to point out is what he calls the linear thematic progression. So T is theme, R is ream. And this, it's sort of like a stepping where the first ream gets picked up as the second theme, and then the second ream gets picked up as the third theme. And so it's a way of galloping along down a logical pathway, and you often see it in explanations. But here's just a little example. and I've labeled them according to their place in the theme ream structure. We are living, and living means a next. Without a next, we're no longer living. So you can see that we can use this in cause and effect a lot. So the next pattern is what you might see quite clearly in academic, I've got a typo there, academic writing, where it's about setting up an argument. So you might have an overarching theme or some general category, and it might have components to it that you might want to then talk about. So this would be, you derive your themes and reams out of a broader or more abstract category. And you can see this in science writing. So all substances can be divided into two classes, elementary substances and compounds. So there's our big theme, elementary and compounds. And then it splits. We're now going to talk about an elementary substance, our first theme, is a substance which consists of atoms of only one kind. And then on we go. And then it shifts to the second theme, a compound, which is derived from the first clause, is a substance which consists of atoms of two or more different kinds, and so on. So that's our derived theme. So you can see this within paragraphs and across whole texts. Then the third kind is, move you out of the way a bit, is what's called the continuous thematic progression, where the theme stays stable, but we learn a lot about it in multiple reams, which are different, providing new information. So to give you an example of one of those, I'll just move you over. So I came forth, I was already there, I was there to begin with. So we've got I, and 3 different reams. So you can see there's a lot to play with when you're looking at the patterns back in the clause parsing spreadsheet. You can start to look for these patterns. And oops. Just want to show you, move this over. Is there a way to make this smaller? With that one? Oh, there we go. Yeah. So if you just recall back to that example with Marshall and the daughter talking, she said, I feel totally, amongst other things, when she spoke, she talked about being rejected. She didn't know how to connect with any man. She said you would immediately interrupt. She would say, you said I was a worthless female girl. And she said, it's all because of you. And then when Marshall spoke and he was trying to capture what she's saying, in NVC is one of the strategies of empathy is to, first of all, hear the person, but then also offer the person what they've heard and what they are understanding they feel and what they are guessing they might need. So in response to her pain, he basically summed it up as there's a great deal of pain, hurt, and that's because I'm guessing you have a need for respect. And then I understand you are feeling desperate. And that's possibly, I'm guessing, because you have a need for closeness. So this kind of congruent affect, he's pulling adjectives of affect out of her pain over here, how she's feeling as a result of what she's saying. And then he's working out or thinking or guessing those feelings of affect point to something that this person needs, and he's labeled them as nouns. So this activity of translating into attitude and then looking behind the attitude for what they might need is kind of the pattern you see inside the reams of the empathizer. So in a way, we've got over here on the left, we've got theme, 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 and the rest is ream. And we're hearing about what he does and what he said she was like. So he is, Marshall over here is repeating that, but not as a complete reiteration exactly of what they've said, but a reinterpretation or a translation into what nonviolent communication people call feelings and needs. Why is this important? Because we can show it in the thematic progression. Oh, sorry. What this, I don't need to go through that. I'm just worrying about the time. So when the empathizer is offering empathy, they are, in a way, giving back the information that they've heard in the reams of the person in pain as their reams, and I'm naming them given reams. So in all of the papers, all of the dialogues I looked at, there were 4 kinds of strategies that the empathizer was using in the reams, which were reiterating what they might have actually said, and I'll show you an example of that in a moment, or paraphrasing or summarizing what they've said, guessing what they might feel from what they've said, and working out as a guess what they might need as they think about the person's pain. And that falls into a pattern. Oops. So here's an example of just straight reiteration. So the person in pain is referring to themselves as I. So I've given you a little hint at this before. I came forth. I was already there to begin with. I prefer that. I just allowed myself for others to see me. So that's all brand new information. So I'm calling them new reams. And then the empathizer says, you came forth because you were already there. You just allowed it to come forth. So you can see that in the theme spot, I, in the person in pain, is repeated as dyactic you, meaning the person in pain, as you. And in each case, the, sorry, I've got to get to my arrows. The theme stays the same all the way through, while the reams in the person in pain, so the empathizee's turn, are new as new reams hanging off the given theme. When the empathizer comes in, repeats these new reams as given themes, and so the pattern of continuous thematic progression continues. And so this was, I felt, a very key component of the practice, and that ideationally, the theme in an empathy dialogue is typically unmarked I and you. And what happens is the empathizer picks up I and expresses it as you, as the theme, and thereby telling the person in pain that they're being heard, that they are important and they are the point of departure for the empathizer's words. The newsworthy information in the reams of the person in pain are reiterated by the empathizer as given reams. And as it turns out, these given reams fall into 4 categories. So you saw with the father-daughter that we had examples of feelings. You must be feeling desperate and hurt, and needs for closeness. But in this example here, we can see we've got exact repetition. And in other examples, we can see this kind of information being summarized. So taking into account that pattern of reiterating given reams using these 4 different strategies of repetition, paraphrase, feelings, and needs, I'm arguing that the particular feature of theme in empathy dialogues is this continuous pattern, provided you accept that the reams of the empathizer can shift and change along these strategic lines. So that's how I used, that's how I did my analysis. I just want to show you now, I'm going to stop sharing because I've got to go get this. Here we go. And how are we going for time, Arnie? Oh, I'm almost there. That's perfect. So I will go back to Zoom, share. So the dialogue you listened to at the beginning, I've now taken my analysis and tidied it up. And I will just want to show you the color patterns. So here's the father, and when it's kind of a salmon color, it's a given, and when it's a green color, it's new. So what we've got here is the daughter talks about I, she then goes to him, but you can see lots of I's, and you can see, so they're all constant, but you can see lots of new reams that are always green. And then we get down to the father, and suddenly he is talking a little bit about himself, where he's grateful for her hard work. And then he goes into what I'm hearing, and is what she has imparted to him through her pain, and he has captured as feelings and needs. And then she goes back. So you can see you've got back up here, you've got the salmon and the green happening, and down here you've got the salmon and the salmon. So these are what I'm arguing are given rings. So you can see this pattern happening as you go through. So it's salmon green, but it's more salmon salmon. So I just wanted to do that. And that's the end of my talk. So I'm conscious that I didn't give you a big explanation at the beginning about the practice of empathetic listening. I just wanted to concentrate on the analytical tools. But I'll leave it there, and if anybody's got any questions, I'll do my best to field them. If I don't see them, somebody else can point that out. But yeah, are there any questions? Maybe, direct them to either Arnie and I, and we'll answer them. So, oh, Penny's got a question. Go, Penny.
Ah, that was actually applause. Thank
Oh,
you.
I didn't see
Thank
my
you.
eyesight.
But I guess I had a very small question for Arnie as he was explaining positioning. And I suppose I'm sort of thinking about successful and unsuccessful campaigns that we were looking at a little earlier. To say, so Arnie, you say, how does BDS manage to position the person receiving the message, however that happens? So I think I'm just sort of worrying about how that interplay of tendering and rendering, can you say that they really do manage to position, or are they just sort of attempting to position, I guess is my very tiny question.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, for most part of what they are doing, it is an attempt to achieve so. But based on Michelle Zapabini's work on ambient affiliation, this is how social media operates. So you have an imagined audience in mind when crafting your message, and you try to position them in a way or another in the hope of reacting accordingly and within that framework. So we can call this kind of affiliation work as ambient affiliation work. That includes an attempt to position an imagined audience, but not an audience interacting live. But if there is an interaction, as we showcased during the ISFC on Twitter, for example, then the BDS can interact and engage in conversations and see if their message is effective or not. Yeah, it's only an attempt. Yeah.
Thanks, Arnie.
Yes.
Anybody want to ask a question? in that event, oh yes, Agita, there we go.
Yeah. Thank you for your presentation, Elizabeth, and also Oni, and hi, Penny. So maybe I have like the most stupid question because I am new in SFL, and it is related to affiliation, which is explained by Oni. My first question is, I saw that there is one example, Puma is blah, blah, blah in Israel's apartheid regime. And you explained that Puma is bonding with the evaluation, one evaluation. And I saw in the example, is it possible to make a kind of bonding between Israel and apartheid regime based on that sentence, I mean?
Yeah, well, thanks for the question. And I think it's very important to determine where you're coming from, and that is the context. So the BDS is, as they argue, they are taking the side of the international law, which is against occupation, legal occupation, and illegal settlements, apartheid, etc. So people are positioned within that moral field, and they are urged to take stance and action in relation to this reference point. But when it comes to Israel and what Israel is doing, well, here we cannot argue for affiliation or moral affiliation, because what's going on is against the international law, and that is okay. That is the main reference of argument here. Again, we need to analyze the Israeli discourse, what they are saying about this, because many of them are saying, yes, we are occupying the land and we continue to occupy, for example, Gaza and the West Bank, etc., until no one is left. And other people are saying, no, this is not an occupation. We are just freeing our homelands. It's about how they frame the situation. But we are not arguing for a party or against another. We are arguing for how language is used by a party that is taking the side of certain set of values and moral orders, and how they position the audience in relation to these moral orders. So back to the same example, what's happening is that coupling Puma with negative judgment. So this is the coupling of an ideation with evaluative meaning. Yeah. And that instantiates a bond that is complicity in appetite, for example, is bad. That is the negotiated bond in relation to the reference point, and that is international law, ICJ rulings in relation to the Palestinian struggle. Yeah, but when it comes to the other side of the story and how they perceive and how they construct reality, that requires, I think, a different kind of analysis, not affiliation for sure. It probably critical discourse analysis of power relations. Framing might be relevant to this kind of analysis. Victim blaming, discourse of justification. Yeah, all these kind of analysis, I imagine, are appropriate, but not affiliation analysis. Yeah, that's what I can say.
Oh, okay.
Did I answer your question?
Just on Agita's question, where what is the relationship between those two concepts, Israel and apartheid? So I think even Elizabeth's method too might show that they are made equivalent frequently through the repeated texts, through all the range of texts. Is that what you're asking, Agita? Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah, in relation to this, I guess the campaigns are constructing a moral binary opposition where the BDS, the urged audience, and the moral orders are positioned positively. So the BDS and the activists who are supporting the BDS cause are constructed as anti-colonialists. And this is the kind of textual persona being construed throughout the campaigns. And the targeted entities, such as the Puma, HP, etc., are constructed as pro-colonialists, taking the side of the occupier. This is the kind of binary opposition being constructed there. So BDS movement in its campaigns is not targeting or talking to any Israeli party, but to their audience to take action towards targeted entities, businesses, institutions, and their governments as a way to pressure the Israeli government. So the discourse and the negotiation of bonds is not happening between the BDS and Israel. It's happening between the BDS and the audience to boycott certain businesses that operate in illegal settlements, or to urge these businesses to divest from the illegal settlements, or to encourage states and countries to impose sanctions. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Cheers.
Any other questions? Okay. Well, just before we close, there was a chat which wanted to clarify, or there's a chat from David Paul Freeman. Let's have a look what David says. Thank you, Aoni. And you'd also say, I think, that people would be very welcome to join the SIG Facebook group for more news. So can we say that Reem is also given? Oh, you just said this. Is that the key feature of what empathetic listening is? Yes, Daniel, that's what I'm arguing. And then David says, am I correct in thinking that Arnie's case is basically analysing a monologic discourse from a movement, while Elizabeth is analysing an empathic dialogue between individuals, very much guided by the empathizer? In the long term, it would be great to understand how movements, communities might enter some kind of dialogue with each other at a societal level, with hopefully a positive aim. In this enterprise, good and evil are important reference points. I only mentioned these terms maybe as if they are absolute, but these different groups will understand differently.
Yeah. Yeah, I think in relation to the last comment, yeah. Thanks, David, for the lovely comment. Yeah, that's the analysis of what BDS is trying to do through the use of language and how they present themselves in terms of textual persona as the good doers. So it's not about how I'm presenting them, it's about how they construct them in discourse. And of course, I agree with you that in future, it is very important to look at dialogues and how activists talk to each other and talk to people. But one of the discursive activities that digital activists and social movements get involved in is basically the digital discourse, where we have instances of ambient affiliation and we don't have any direct dialogue. And yeah, I agree that focus on dialogue and conversations is an area to focus on in future. Thank you for the recommendation.
And I'll just comment that as Aoni has worked on monologues with appraisal, I've also worked on appraisal in these dialogues, looking at how, interestingly, if you think about the woman who was involved in a lot of negative judgment about herself and about her father, in the appraisal analysis I did, the empathizer is can reiterate using the same negative judgments or appreciations, or actually takes those negative judgments and turns them into a positive need that's at stake. So there's an interesting appraisal shift away from being stuck in the negative and opening up to something positive and new, or opening up to a positive behind the negative. So the appraisal analysis, I would just argue that dialogically we can do appraisal as well as monologically, and I was doing that, but I didn't show you that today. It just wasn't enough time. But yeah, I think both of these, and equally theme analysis works with monologues as well as dialogues. And both methods can be used without any difficulty across those two, monologue, dialogue. Anyway, well, is there any more questions before I close? No?
Yeah, probably it's good to encourage everyone to join us and follow our news on Facebook and LinkedIn. So it is SFL Inc., a special interest group on the symbiotics of peace, compassion, empathy. And yeah, I think it's very important to thank everyone for the big crowd we have today.
Yeah, fantastic. And our next seminar will be in October. I mean, webinar will be in October. So just watch the Facebook page or the ASFLNet, and we'll advertise it that way. So thank you, everybody, for attending. It was a great afternoon. We'll see you next time.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone. Bye, Elizabeth. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye. Okay, I will stop recording. How do I stop this thing recording? So Penny, oh, there we go, stop recording. Are you stopping your receiver?